Welcome to the JavaScript Essential Training Series. I am Mike King, your host. And in this tutorial, we're actually going to have an introduction to the JavaScript training. So JavaScript is a scripting language that is used to make web pages more interactive. JavaScript gives the web developer the ability to include interactivity into the website that would not be available without it. JavaScript is the most popular programming language in the world, and JavaScript can change HTML attributes dynamically. We've been using JavaScript for years to actually add interactivity to web pages. As in all areas of web development, you'll need a good text editor and a test environment to develop your JavaScript code. JavaScript is not Java, and that's the first thing I really want to point out. It is not Java. They're two totally different programming languages. A lot of people confuse JavaScript thinking it's some kind of pared down version of the Java programming language. It is not. JavaScript is completely separate from Java. You'll need a basic knowledge of HTML in order to really learn JavaScript, so it's very important that you understand how HTML and CSS work prior to jumping into JavaScript, because most of the JavaScript programming language actually interacts with HTML and CSS. I have a very good set of tutorials on HTML that I'd recommend you watch prior to starting these tutorials. They're actually on the website. I have a 26-hour course if you really want to get in-depth into HTML with a 7-hour CSS primer that's also on the website. But you do need to have a basic knowledge of HTML and CSS before you jump into JavaScript. So let's move into our development environment and demonstrate some JavaScript. All right, so let me drop out of our presentation and drop into our development environment. For anyone that's not familiar, this is the developing environment inside of OnTarget HTML5. I actually use the XAMPP Apache stack, XAMPP server. That gives me the Apache MySQL and PHP plus Perl all rolled into one package. I've been using it for years. I really like it. Just got my last update just a few months ago, I believe. I tend to use Sublime Text 2 as my text editor of choice. Now I do jump back and forth. I will use different editors depending upon what I'm teaching and how many students I have in the class. And I do tend to demonstrate some other browsers. I've been known to use Atom. I use Notepad++, but anyway, I may jump back and forth, but the one I use most often is Sublime Text 3. That's the one the version that's currently Sublime Text is on, and I've been using Sublime Text for, I think, since they came out. I know that I had the version prior to version 1, and they don't update their versions very often. And I use Google Chrome for my web browser most of the time. I am connected to our local host inside of Section 6, my JavaScript Section 1 tutorial series. That's where we'll be starting out this particular session. So I wanted you to become familiar with my development environment. That is what I use. I use it for almost all the tutorials that we do on the website. So getting back to what we're here for, JavaScript is something that you add to web pages to make them much more interactive. JavaScript's been around for quite a while, and you'll need to add JavaScript to your web pages through the use of script tags. We have to have script tags. If script tags aren't there, it's not going to work inside of your HTML document. That's what actually tells the web rendering engine, and we have different rendering engines depending upon what browser you're using, but that's what tells that engine exactly what's between those tags, that this is script, it's not a part of HTML. So the script tag is used to define a client-side scripting language like JavaScript. The script element either contains scripting statements or it points to external script files through the source attribute. And you're going to see as you go through this training, this will probably be about a 60 or 70 section tutorial set. As we go through the training, we're going to start out with everything internally, but we're going to advance our way to external scripting JavaScript files, where they'll be doing much more than some of the little things we'll be doing in the first 15 or 20 tutorials. So the type attribute was required in HTML4, but it's optional in HTML5. And what I mean by the type attribute, let me go ahead and I'm going to put a heading in here. I'm just going to call this an introduction to JavaScript. And then I'm going to save this file because you'll notice I'm actually using a template file. I'm going to do a save as and save this as an introduction to JavaScript. The template is my base file that I use to start off with all my tutorials. It's a basic HTML5 template. Good time to pause if you want to type this in so that you can be in the same position that we're in, or same point that we're in. And now I'm going to go ahead and load that intro tablet into my document window, and you'll see that I've got this introduction to JavaScript. I must not have saved that change because it didn't take my lowercase n. There we go. An introduction to JavaScript inside my browser window also. So script tags. If we're going to enter JavaScript into the document, we actually have to start with script tags. So we start those just like we do an HTML tag. And this type attribute, which was required in HTML 4.01, is no longer required in HTML 5. I tend to use it anyway, but it's not a requirement because right now JavaScript is the scripting language used most often inside of HTML. And by default, the rendering engines assume when it sees a script tag, it will be JavaScript. If this was PHP or some other language, it starts with a different type of tag. So it assumes that it's going to be JavaScript, so the type is no longer a requirement inside of HTML5. Normally, the script tags will include a source attribute which will point to an external JavaScript file that's being used, or on occasion, they can contain actual scripts inside the script tags. And that's how we're going to do most of ours starting out in these tutorials. We're going to include most of our code inside these script tags. So let me show you an example of what I mean. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this from my text document. If you've purchased the tutorial set, you actually have access to all these exercise files, so you can copy and paste. I would recommend that you type this. It's the best way to learn it. I'm going to go ahead and save these changes. I don't expect you to understand what I've typed on the screen right now. Just know that it's in these script tags, and because it's in the script tags, the rendering engine is going to interpret it as JavaScript. JavaScript understands that document.write means I want you to put this in my browser window or in my viewport. So when I save these changes and I refresh my browser window, that text will appear in my viewport. It's basically telling it to write it there. And basically what we're doing by doing this, by the way, is we're testing our browser to make certain that it's set up correctly for JavaScript. Because if you can't get past this little line of code right here, you're going to have problems with every other tutorial we do. So make sure this is working. Make sure you've got your template set up and working correctly. And make sure that when you ran this little script, it told you hope your day is going well. That lets you know that your browser window is interpreting JavaScript correctly, and we can move forward with the tutorials. We used to have protections to place older browsers, and the support of JavaScript. Those type of browsers should be gone or going by the wayside soon. I'm going to make the assumption that we'll be using newer browsers to view and test our applications, so you shouldn't have any problem with anything we do in this tutorial series. So that should wrap up this tutorial. You've been introduced to JavaScript. You know what we're going to do. You know how we're going to do it. And I look forward to seeing you in the tutorials. And they are going to get progressively harder as we go. But JavaScript is a very cool language, and it's going to really add a lot of new interactivity to your websites once you learn it. So I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.